Welcome to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you could join us. Our first show of 2025. Can you believe it? We're going into season 18 of Go Green Radio. We've been on the air since 2008. And to ring off the new year, we have one of my sheroes. She's been with us before, but we've always got new and exciting things to talk about. Heidi Sanborn is joining us today. She is the nation's foremost expert on producer responsibility and product stewardship, and is one of the co-founders of her organization. And I just love having her on the National Stewardship Action Council. And Heidi, I want to welcome you back to Go Green Radio. It's always a thrill to have you on. And I want to start by reminding our listeners about the work of the National Stewardship Action Council. Give us an overview of who you are as an organization and what you do.
Hi, Jill. It's so great to be here to start 2025. So the Stewardship Action Council is a 501c4 nonprofit, meaning we actually can lobby and take positions on bills and even endorse candidates. And we advocate for a responsible circular economy and anything that falls under that umbrella, whether it's producer responsibility policy, banning products from sale like mercury-containing lighting. We did that in California, or other policies. There's about 7 that we use. And then we have the Stewardship Action Foundation, and they have separate boards, but that foundation is a 501c3 where people can donate, get a tax deduction, and it does all the education and outreach to support the advocacy work we do at the National Stewardship Action Council.
It's amazing. And I want to get your website out there because everybody should really take a look at the link. And so can you give us your URL real quick so everybody can maybe get on there and follow along while we talk?
Yes. So just Google for this National Stewardship Action Council, but we also have a website for the Stewardship Action Foundation because, again, they're separate with separate boards. And it's www.nsaction.us. And we also have for the other organization, that is the stewardship-foundation.org.
Nice. All right. Well, if everybody wants to open up a new tab in your browser and check that out while we talk with Heidi, we're talking about hazardous waste today. And we're going to be talking about why we need to keep it out of our waste stream. There are a lot of reasons, everything from economic reasons to environmental reasons. And we're going to be talking about some of the components of hazardous waste that Heidi and many advocates are trying to work on. So, I want to talk about items that are found in our household waste that are hazardous, because this is something that touches every single one of our listeners and something we should all understand. So, Heidi, talk to us about what are some of the common household hazardous waste items that we might find in our household?
Well, I think about, when you go to a hardware store, the smell in there, the different chemicals that are off-gassing, or even in your grocery store laundry and home aisle. There's a lot of off-gassing of chemicals, and you can smell them. Things like aerosol paints or any sort of faux finish, furniture oil or paint. We've got caulking compounds, we've got pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, all the sides, I call them.
Mm-hmm.
They're killers, and they're designed to kill things, and they can hurt us as well. It's not just targeted at a bug. Although they are working on chemistries and different ways to interrupt reproductive cycles of insects and other things, which I really hope they figure out soon so we can get rid of these very dangerous chemicals that are dangerous to everything that lives. But we're at a place now where the amount of products that are considered household and hazardous is just growing. And local governments cannot respond using taxes and garbage rates with enough money to pick up this mess at end of life. And it's very, very, very expensive and getting more expensive by the week. It seems like we're seeing new products hit the market monthly at least that are very expensive for us to handle. So we're at the point now where, we're collecting about 5 to 10% of what's available to collect. and it's costing us literally millions. In fact, in Los Angeles County, they just introduced a motion for their staff to come back with a report on this because they spent $14 million last year, and they're, estimating 5 to 10% of what's out there got collected. And they're reducing services because they don't have enough money to pay for all this. So how do we solve for it? Well, a lot of people who find this inconvenient to manage them, they throw them in the trash. They throw them in the recycling bin. We're exposing our waste workers and our sanitation workers. They now have the fourth most deadly industry in the country, according to the Bureau of Labor. That just came out last week. So we are trying to protect not only planet, but people. And people are the first ones exposed to these improperly disposed of dangerous products. And I will add, we've got batteries in almost everything. Even shoes light up. That's a battery. And those batteries are usually now lithium ion because they pack a lot of power in a very small battery. The problem with them is they have runaway fires. And we are seeing fires in our industry at an unprecedented and unsustainable rate, to the point where we're literally burning facilities and trucks to the ground. The insurance rates are getting so high, we may not even be able to get insurance for our transfer stations and landfills and trucks. We just had in Sunnyvale last week, I put it in our newsletter, 2 long haul trucks full of 40 tons each of garbage burned to the ground. Something in them started a fire. We have a landfill, Chiquita Canyon in Los Angeles, which has an unmitigated fire underground right now that they can't put out, that's gotten so bad with the off-gassing that people have had to leave their homes and abandon them because they can't sell them. And the owner of the landfill, Waste Connections, just announced that they are closing it for good. That was
Mm-hmm.
1/3 of the disposal options for LA County, which has now got a huge disaster with these awful fires. Where
Mm-hmm.
are they going to put all that material?
Yeah. Wow. It's a compounding problem. And I think, a lot of folks may be entirely unaware of what they have in their homes that could be contributing to this. There are a lot of consumers who feel like, hey, if it's on the shelf of my local grocery store, I mean, that's all good for me, right? It's all safe. How do we know if we look at the products and the labeling, how do we know if it's a household hazardous waste item?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because this is one of the big things that came out of the Recycling Commission that I chaired for California from 2020 to 2022. The first policy recommendation all 17 of us could agree on was that we needed producers to be responsible for household hazardous waste. And that we needed, one of the other policies we asked the legislature to do was to identify and make sure things are properly labeled, particularly with, chasing arrows is recyclable and what is compostable. But really, the problem we have now is that most people don't understand chemistry anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Putting an HE or a HG, I'm sorry, on the label of mercury containing products, but most people don't know what that means. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know their elemental charts anymore. So we have labels that don't mean anything to the public. And when they break a fluorescent lamp with mercury in it, they don't know they're literally breathing in mercury that's going to go straight to their brain and their liver, and they will probably never get it out of their body. So without a chelation therapy, which is traumatic. So I think people are at a place now where they don't know, and we haven't. I think a lot of influence has been placed by the manufacturers to make sure people really aren't aware, because they're greenwashing. They don't want things to
Mm-hmm.
look as dangerous as they are. And unfortunately, I think the government's allowed things to get completely out of control. They either over label in a way that people still don't understand, or they are not labeling enough at all, or they're just saying, oh, this is recyclable, this is compostable, and they're not. It's really what I call the Wild West
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in labeling, and the government is not protecting us. I say all the time, what you don't know can and will hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they're trying to keep you in the dark because that allows them to sell more things because you're less scared of what you probably should be a little scared of.
Right. And if people want to know, like if they do know, hey, I've got some paint or I've got some other, items that I know are household hazardous waste. How can they find out what to do with them? This is a very zip code specific situation. How do people find out?
That's exactly right. The problem is that we've evolved in this country to have every local government have to deal with it and fix it on their own when they don't even know what's coming to market, which means we'll never have enough resources and we won't have harmonized messaging or a harmonized system. So what's happening now are, especially with packaging, because we've seen 5 states pass packaging producer responsibility, the packaging manufacturers are coming together and saying, hey, we want harmony amongst these rules. We want to come up with the same labels, the same messaging, the same infrastructure. For example, color coded carts. They're different colors in different states.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes it problematic when you move. People are pretty mobile in this society. You might in one place be able to bring your battery to your Best Buy, and thank you to Best Buys and retailers that agree to collect different hazardous waste. We're very grateful for that, but that's very limited. And in many places, they don't even have household hazardous waste collection in this country yet. In our
Hmm.
state, California, they have a rule that started in 2006, which really kicked off and gave a lot of momentum for producer responsibility in general, a rule that said if you have a common household hazardous waste under the category of what we call technically universal waste, they're universally found, like batteries, mercury containing lighting, things like that, mercury thermostats. If you have those, they're easier to collect. We'll reduce the requirements on the collectors to make it more convenient so they can be collected in stores or in non-household hazardous waste sort of facilities. But the vast majority of household hazardous waste, like pesticides, herbicides, and fire extinguishers and other things, they have to go back to a public facility managed by chemists. People bring in stuff that don't have a label. We have no idea what they've mixed together. They have to do testing. Otherwise, they can't figure out what to do with it safely. There's a lot of danger in these products, especially when they're mismanaged. And people don't know. They're just not chemists. So oh, let's just merge everything into one container and bring it to the facility. And that could be explosive. That could create a gas that's very dangerous. So there's just a lot of problems because people don't know the labels and there's no consistent labeling. The only thing that's really consistent is the federal rule on flammable, corrosive, reactive,
Hmm.
I think,
The things that you see at the post office when there's a
right,
sign up there that says "Don't mail this." That's pretty much the only thing we have,
that's it.
consensus on. We're
That
going to take
triangle.
a quick break, but when we come back, we have much more with Heidi Sanborn. So don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you could join us. Our guest today is Heidi Sanborn. She's a co-founder of the National Stewardship Action Council, and we're talking about hazardous waste and why it's so perilous and why it's such a big problem and what we can do about it and how we need to educate ourselves. Heidi, I want to ask you, in the state of California, who regulates household hazardous waste, and do you believe they have all of the regulatory tools they need to address this issue?
Good question. So, Cal Recycle, the state agency that does solid waste, interestingly has a household hazardous waste grant program and collects some of the data from local governments on how much they're collecting in what they call a Form 303. However, recently we've been told that the governor's office is directing that DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, really takes that over. And that kind of makes sense because they're the ones that have all the scientists and they're the ones that determine what is toxic in California and how they have to be handled. The problem is that agency has been fraught with a lot of problems over the last few decades. They allowed a temporary permit for, I think, 34 years for Exide's lead acid battery recycling plant down in Los Angeles that ended up polluting, I believe, 1,400 homes with lead emissions falling onto their property where kids were playing, and created a lot of exposure through their lack of oversight. And they were highly criticized for this. They just got a new director, and we're excited to have her there. She's young and very energetic, and we're hoping for the best. But this agency is it's really in a state of pivot, trying to figure out. They used to do just industrial facilities, and now they're being tasked from the legislature with our bills because we've been told they have to go to that agency. Things like EV batteries, marine flares, which are explosive products like gunpowder or fireworks, and um, and this household hazardous waste producer responsibility bill that we've had with Senator Allen last year. It evolved to be just expansion of the paint care stewardship program, which Cal Recycle is managing. Paint is, less dangerous than some of the other toxic products. But from now on, we're told we have to give these bills and these policies to that agency. But that agency really isn't that familiar with producer responsibility, their role in it. They've been very open to discussions about that. But the agency is going to have to figure out with their new hazardous waste plan coming out in March, what is hazardous? They have to update their own testing protocols. They've been using what I call the fish kill test, the aquatox test, and that is we're only one of two states still using that. All the other states are using what we call computational toxicology. Use the math. If we know what the chemical is, and the percentage in the product, we can use math to figure out how it's going to impact life forms.
Mhm.
We are not doing that now. We're literally killing fish, which is extremely time consuming, expensive, and cruel. So we're
Mhm.
trying to get away from that, but the agency hasn't updated that test. That test, because fish are sensitive, they breathe water through their body, they die a lot, even on some makeup and other things. So they're all being labeled as hazardous when what we're trying to do is get the most dangerous products um, first under producer responsibility. But that also goes to show you, why is our makeup killing fish?
Yeah.
Very
That
concerning.
that is, I mean, that you just blew my mind there. As long as I've been in the biz, this is the first I'm hearing of that, and that is insane.
Right. Well,
It,
and that's the problem that we were putting PFAS in makeup. We were
mhm.
putting it in waterproof mascara. Was it labeled as such? You brought up labeling? No. How would I
Mhm.
know that my
Mhm.
mascara had PFAS in it, a
Mhm.
bioaccumulative toxic cancer-causing chemical? Why was the government allowing this?
Yeah.
Well, we can go back to follow the money, but I always
Mhm.
follow the money. And the
Mhm.
money is that there's a lot of people in government that they leave government and get these big jobs making a lot of money, figuring out how to, these companies get protected from the rules that I think the public needs. And this is what worries me right now is that we're seeing an attack on government a lot of it's with misinformation. And because I work in government, I see the back. There's certainly not perfect, but there's a lot of reason we need government to work to protect us. And it's starting to really fail because there's been a lack of trust and a lack of transparency, and a lot of, quite frankly, switching from, government to industry and back and forth, and litigation. We got litigated in California. We had, I can't remember the local government, but we had a rule about trying to, or no, it was the state was trying to educate people about alternatives, safe alternatives to household
Yeah.
hazardous waste. And they were told to stop, that they couldn't show that these were dangerous enough, or they were not allowed to advertise specific products as safer. So we've got a problem.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm trying to educate you so you can protect yourself. And then I'm trying to, change the rules so it's transparent and you can protect yourself easily. Because right now you can't. It's all hidden.
And for folks who would like to try and find some safer alternatives today, what are their options? What can people do, and where do they find information to help them choose safer products and reduce their household hazardous waste?
It's a really good question. So I always start with the stuff that touches your body the most frequently. So your products like your makeup, your skin lotions, your hair products, your hair dyes, all of those things have the potential to be dangerous, believe it or not. And as we know, lots of medications go right through your skin because your skin is very porous. So you must make sure all of it is safe. We found lead in makeup. There's groups called like Environmental Working Group.
Mm-hmm.
They have a wonderful website. There's a lot of information there about how to protect yourself. Looking, sunscreens can be very toxic. They've done studies on those and tells you which ones are safe on their website. Makeup, the same. There's groups called the Pact Collective that I'm working with, that are a bunch of companies in the cosmetic space that are working together to try and reduce their packaging, and also the chemistries, making sure they're safer. We have groups like ours. We tell you about products and truth in labeling, but there's so many that it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult for people to find out. You have to do some digging. I would just say this: if it's intended to kill something, the chances are really good it's probably something you want to find an alternative to.
Mm-hmm.
So all the pesticides and herbicides, there's lots of different mixtures. My husband, to kill some weeds, I think he out by the fence, he sprayed, I think it was something he found on the internet that worked. It was a vinegar and something else compound, and he went out and sprayed it and it worked. It has to be applied a couple times, but it totally worked. So
Mm-hmm.
look for things like that. Staying away from plastics for containing your food is very important. Plastics are not benign. They
Mm-hmm.
leach. Some leach more than others, and some have different chemicals than others. But the phthalates and other things that can be found in soft plastics affect, actually, they found out that the chemicals that are in your IV tubes that were, because they're soft, were
Mm-hmm.
leaching into the body and actually preventing women who were receiving chemo from having as effective a treatment. It
Wow.
was affecting their hormones in a way that was aggravating the cancer while they were getting chemo.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
We've got a problem. I want to shift gears just a little bit before we go to the next commercial break and talk about electric vehicle batteries, because this is this is coming. And I'd like for you to help us understand kind of the scope of the problem that we're facing if we don't have a good system in place to keep these batteries out of the waste stream.
Excellent. Happy to.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk just a little bit about that. We've got about 4 minutes, and
Oh,
so
great.
let's do it.
Oh, well, EV batteries, as clean transportation is critical to reducing climate emissions. So we're all thrilled about that. But the batteries that are used to power these cars do come from the ground. They are minerals, and some of them are what we call critical earth minerals, meaning they're hard to find. And they're in high demand. The batteries also have a lot of power in a very small package. So if they are damaged, they can often create that runaway fire hazard that we've talked about. Depending, there's different chemistries of these batteries, and there's new chemistries coming out that are going to be safer and less prone to the runaway fires. But these are very big, powerful batteries. And if we have people who don't know how to handle them or ship them unsafely, we can have very serious fires and explosions. And we need those rare earth minerals back. So
Hmm.
it's if we're going to have the next generation of high-tech products. So we're very excited that there's companies that are establishing in the country to recycle these EV batteries. We just had one open up it's almost, it's it's a soft open, but they're about ready to open here in Sparks, Nevada. And that's right over the hill from where I am in Sacramento. I've been to see it. It's a fantastic facility. Was started by one of the founders or the people who were working alongside Elon Musk at Tesla, the Tesla factory there, and decided we need more of these materials back for the next generation of
Yeah.
car batteries. So he set up this really top-notch recycling facility that can take basically any battery, from your lawnmower battery to your power tool battery to everything. E-bikes is a big one too.
Hmm.
And so they are now really looking for having enough batteries to feed that very big plant. But the problem is, how do we make sure they're all getting back to the right place? Because even one battery disposed of improperly can do a lot of environmental damage and hurt people. So, as I said, the amount of fires we're having in our landfills, our trucks, and our transfer stations is it's exponentially growing so quickly. We're now the fourth most dangerous and deadly. We lost 41 people in our industry last year in the United States. Right.
Hmm.
Not even just injured. So we've got to be careful and make sure these things have a home, and that everybody who touches them knows how to manage them and touch them without damaging the battery.
Hmm.
That
And I know that there was legislation introduced on that in California last year, and I do want to talk about that in just a little bit. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk with you, Heidi, about this California bill that was supported by the legislature, but ended up being vetoed by the governor, dealing with this exact issue. So don't go away, folks. We've got so much more to talk about on Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you could join us. And if you're just tuning in, let me catch you up. Today, we're joined by Heidi Sanborn of the National Stewardship Action Council. And we've been talking about the perils of hazardous waste in our waste stream. And right before the break, we were talking about EV batteries, electric vehicle batteries. And Heidi, I want you to talk to us about a bill that was supported in the California state legislature last year to deal with this issue. Talk to us about the bill and why the governor vetoed it.
Well, it was SB 615, the electric vehicle battery recycling bill by Senator Ben Allen, who's been a great champion of the circular economy bills. And there was a report that was done by the state that said offered some policy approaches, including producer responsibility, to solve the problem. And the bill got to the governor, and the governor, I don't have the veto message in front of me, but it basically said, we need to work on this more. And we've already spent years working on it. I feel that at this point we're already in trouble because we've got I was just at a hazardous waste facility down in Elk Grove a couple weeks ago, and they have their first EV battery that's loose that just showed up. And I connected them with that Redwood Materials company I told you about to find a place for it. But they're very powerful, and they can't be stored for more than a year in these even professional facilities. So um, it's a problem, and we need to solve this. And I really hope this year the bill gets reintroduced and the governor signs it. He has had a history recently of vetoing bills that he then later signs that don't really change that much. So
Mm.
sometimes it's a political situation, sometimes it's a budget situation. There's different reasons that they veto. Um, but yeah, so I hope that this next year we've got enough agreement we can get this done.
Well, and just my own 2 cents, the governor's really pushing EVs, and he's very supportive of this transition to this fuel type for transportation. But you got to close the loop, sir. And we can't
Exactly.
offer this solution without a solution to the end of life of those products that you're pushing. So I'm with you. I hope that this gets resolved. I want to switch gears to something a little bit similar in terms of renewable energy, but the photovoltaics, PV panels, and their impact on our waste stream, and give us some idea of the scope and magnitude of this problem and how much waste we're talking about, and what's coming in terms of that waste stream.
Well, this is a really big one. And I started working on this in 2015. We were starting to see them come back to landfills by the pickup truck full, and people said, what do I do with them? And we said, we don't know, because we're not legally allowed to take them, and there were no recycling facilities. So first thing was we passed a bill with Senator Monning here in California to reduce the end of life management criteria to that universal waste category that I talked to you about, because that's makes it easier for us to collect and recycle hazardous products, because they're universally found, and we need to find other ways to do it besides a hazardous waste facility. So we did pass that bill. They got declassified down to universal waste, but then the regulations that DTSC put out were so onerous. If you break, if it's got a crack, it has to be handled like this and that. And it was so onerous that basically nobody was citing in California. So we ended up with recycling facilities in Yuma, Arizona, right on the border, and in Reno on the border. And this is where California does itself a disservice. We've made it so difficult for our business to operate in California. We're literally driving the businesses we're driving business into business, but then they site somewhere else. So we lose the jobs. And there's a lot of transportation. So that
Mhm.
adds to the cost tremendously.
Yeah.
Um, so we've got a problem. We don't have a lot of options. I think there's one in Fresno right now, and that's really it. Um, Other states are even ahead of us on this. Washington State passed an EV EPR bill years ago. They're in the process of still implementing it and have hit some bumps, but the panels are being pushed just like the EV batteries, just like the wind blades. I tell everybody clean tech is not clean or green until we have an end of life plan
Hmm.
yet. And a lot of these things were put on the market. And yes, they solved one problem, but they created another.
Yep.
And I will remind them all day, every day, you don't have a green product until you have a closed loop.
Yep,
You just
exactly. And
are putting it
talk
off
to us
until
about like what happens. I mean, if we just said, we'll just put them all in landfill, what are we doing? I mean, really, what is the upshot of putting PV panels in landfills?
well, there's different kinds that have different metals and different chemicals. But I would say always when we have a cradle to grave situation, we've lost that material forever. When you put it in a landfill, it's like scrambling an egg that you can't unscramble.
Hmm.
It's gotten so contaminated, there's no way to even mine it back up. Now there are things that they monofill where they'll put like only tires in a landfill, hoping that someday they can find a market and do something with them. But they aren't doing that for panels, and panels have some of what we call those critical earth minerals.
Hmm.
We must have them back. We don't
Yeah.
have enough of them in the US. If we do not harvest them from this urban mine, then we will not have enough to make the next generation of panels in this country. And if other countries hold us hostage, and they're starting to do that, China did that with Japan over those islands. They got mad at them, stopped selling them those minerals, and then they couldn't even make their own electronics.
Yeah.
So we have to be, this is literally a national security issue.
Hmm.
So there's an entire organization I'm working with nationally in DC that's a bunch of companies that came together and said, look, we need to advocate for circular systems for all these rare earth mineral products, because if we don't, we're going to be held hostage and the country's going to be in danger. So
Hmm.
that's what we're working on now. And that's another reason for these bills to pass.
Well, and rare earth minerals are not unlike fossil fuels. They're finite. So if we use them once and throw them away, I mean, we're really not thinking much of, further down the road with quote unquote clean tech than we were with, fossil fuel based products. So we really need to get those back, as you said. Agreed. And what are some of the legislative and regulatory frameworks that are needed to ensure the proper handling of PV panels when we decommission them? I mean, what's needed?
Well, I can tell you in California, what we need is the DTSC to get the rules to a reasonable place where companies will site here, because the transportation costs are killing our recycling and collection system. The other problem we have is they're not labeled. The panels need to be labeled with their chemistries, just like everything else, because whether the consumer needs to know it or not, the recycler at the end of life needs to know it. Otherwise, guess what? They get to do that fish kill test I told you about, which
Hmm.
wastes a ton of time, costs a ton of money, kills the fish, and it's to just simply identify what's in the panel when we should have been told that by how it's labeled.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to
Absolutely.
tell from a chip that you can just run over the panel. Oh, this is a silicon panel. This is a this panel. And then you can sort them and send them efficiently to the right place. What's happening now is you can't tell. You have to wait for a fish test. They have to be all put into one container and sent to a place for sorting. Somebody else has to identify them because we can't tell from looking at them. It's just an enormous waste of time. We had the same problem with carpet. Carpet wasn't being back stamped to tell us the fiber, so we'd have to pay $25,000 for this gun that shoots a laser at the carpet to tell us what the fiber is. Well, just stamp it on the back, you know?
Yeah.
And so we just put that into a law that passed last year. But this is part of the system if we're not good at passing the baton. So when
Mm-hmm.
companies sell things, if they have no financial interest in what happens at end of life, they just don't care. They won't label it and whatever. The whole system, I say you can't close the loop on the material until you close the loop on the conversation. As we pass batons, there has to be a communication. And as the material goes from producer to consumer to collector to recycler, all those groups have to be communicating to make sure we have the most cost effective system we can have. And
Yeah.
we don't, but
And
we're
we
getting
don't.
there. But we're
Exactly.
getting there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things for everyday Californians, everyday Americans who are like, why does this matter to me? You're paying for this. I
Yep.
mean, you are paying not just for the products, but for the end of life, and not the person who made it. They made all the money up front on selling the product, and you are not only buying the product, you are buying the waste solution. And you know, if it's very difficult, very expensive because it's hazardous and complicated, that isn't your fault, as a consumer, but that is what you're paying for. And that's why the role of government in this and regulations is so important. If we let the market decide, it would be worse than it is today. I mean, these are not things that happen automatically because out of the goodness of somebody's heart, they're like, you know what, we're going to sell all these products. And guess what? We're going to take them back at the end of life and pay for the whole shebang. That's not how companies operate.
Well,
And that's the whole idea of extended producer responsibility.
that's right. And I would say that the problem I see that's really killing us and killing the planet is that our economic system, the way companies have been set up, they're C Corp. They literally have no legal responsibility to people or planet. It's
Hmm.
only shareholders.
Hmm.
And that means that the cost is being burdened on the environment and people.
Yeah, and Mother Nature doesn't have any coin in her pocket. So this is being borne by everyday people. When you pay your garbage bills, when you pay your taxes, this is money that's going to deal with this waste. And that's what I want to make sure we get through to all of our listeners is that whether you realize it or not, this burden is on you and your pocketbook. That is why, LA County Board of Soups is looking at, some alternatives because it's costing the county so much money to deal with this hazardous waste. And that's the what for for everybody who's listening.
Exactly. And they're welcome to please comment. I mean, the supervisors are taking it up at their meeting on the 14th of January, and they'd love to have public comment, especially people from Los Angeles, about, supporting this motion agenda item 14 to get staff to come back with some ideas on what they should do. And one of the options is producer responsibility, and another one is just banning the sale of some of the products that are the most problematic.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we have some more items to talk about in terms of things that are household and industrial hazardous waste that we'll be talking about with Heidi. So don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you're with us today. We're talking with Heidi Sanborn of the National Stewardship Action Council. We're talking about hazardous waste, and we've been talking about extended producer responsibility as well, so that the manufacturers of these hazardous waste products play a role in making sure that they're safely disposed of. I want to talk to you, Heidi, about your work with marine flares. Personally, I do not own a boat. I do not live on the coast. So at first blush, I wasn't interested, to be honest, in this issue until I started reading your website and started looking into why this is a big deal. So talk to us about marine flares, the problems associated with disposing of them, and what's going on with the regulatory environment around this.
Well, when I first heard about it, I thought, what is this? It's very niche.
Yeah.
But the truth is, what we've done is mandated that you have safety equipment on your boat. And until 5 years ago, flares were the only option. And they are explosive. They're not a new technology. I mean, this is just chemistries from the 1800s, literally.
Mm.
And they used to contain perchlorate until 2 years ago, which is a highly toxic chemical. And they're used on water. And when they're expired in 3 years, what do people do with it? Nobody bothered to think about that. So what do? Well, we've talked to boaters. They throw them in the water.
Mm.
What do? They blow them up in their backyard during 4th of July. Totally illegal. You're not supposed to set off safety signals when it's not an emergency. They blow them up in the desert. They dissolve them in 5-gallon buckets and then dump the water into the trash, which means
Oof.
what? It's going to dry. And what did I talk about? Our poor workers, they're
Fire.
breathing all that dust
Mm-hmm.
and exposed on their skin. So this hoping people do something smart is not a good strategy. And what we need to do is come up with very clear messaging and plans so that most people want to do the right thing. You just tell them how to do it clearly, make it easy for them, and don't charge them at end of life. We know that. If we do that, it's going to happen. The problem is there's only one manufacturer of these flares, and the company's called Orion out of New Jersey, and they fought tooth and nail and literally threatened to leave California and stop selling them if
Mm.
we impose this on them, because they said these should be costs that are socialized and buried in garbage and hazardous waste rates. And I said, so you're saying that a person who doesn't even own their own home, let alone a boat, should help subsidize your fancy boating time? Because a lot of us will never even get on a boat. How is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they answered they just don't want to pay for it. So, and now the good news is Orion and other companies, there's other companies that make these products. We had the Coast Guard approve 5 years ago a safe alternative that's an electronic signal, and they sell that too. So, other people say, well, we need the flares, and in the worst conditions, that's the safest. Well, that's fine, but why did you take until 2 years ago to pull perchlorate out? Why aren't you working on different chemistries, or even like try a drone with smoke on it, or that zeroes in, so even in a storm, boats can find you or planes can find you. I don't look for something, but they're just laying back and waiting for everybody else to tell them there's a problem. And now, here we are. So hopefully we can get some support this year and we can get this done. I know it's a priority for the agency because they have not only marine flares that are explosive and in this situation, but they have the same problem with fireworks and ammunition. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I want to get to the point, this is going to be my riff, is that we need to stop allowing companies to sell whatever they want that's hazardous into any state that has no end of life plan, because that's guaranteed to cause pollution and harm people. The end. Like, why don't they have to say and check a box on DTC's website that yes, this is what the product is, this is what it contains, and here's how it's going to be managed, and certify it by the CEO. And then the end. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, the state has something to go back and say, look, you promised us you had this planned out and it's not working. Therefore, we're going to go after a producer run program or some other way to manage this and have you help pay for it. Because again, if the producer buries the cost of end of life in the product, you, the consumer, make the choice to pay the life cycle cost because you're
Mm-hmm.
the one benefiting from the product and chose that product. The rest of us don't benefit from that product. Why should
Hmm.
we have to subsidize? For example, I don't use pesticides. Why should I have to subsidize my neighbor who uses pesticides, which I really wish he wouldn't?
Hmm.
I don't want to do that. I don't think that's fair. And so if we want personal responsibility, then we should be looking at put all those end of life costs into the price of products, reflect that in the product price. And that is a lot of the signal. And that's really how a free market was set up to work. But right now, we're allowing profit for companies to overload the rest of the system where the environment and people are being harmed. And I think we need to right the ship. It's time.
Hmm. If you make a mess, clean it up. Simple as that. And
Yes,
so we learned that in kindergarten.
exactly.
um, During the break, you mentioned to me a producer responsibility organization or PRO that you're excited about. I want to give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, so we're really excited what's happening when we ran the household hazardous waste EPR bill last year with Senator Allen. The paint industry came to us and said, look, we're already running the paint care program. People like it. We don't want any more of our products ending up into a different producer run organization. So can we please now expand to all of our products so that all of them are covered by us? We manage our own furniture paint, arts and crafts paint, marine paint, and solvents. They're all going to be under us. And we said, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And then we were excited that we were approached by a group called the Lubricant Product Manufacturers Association. And this is made up of companies that like Exxon and others that say, look, we need oil and we can recycle it. We have lubricant recycling facilities. We're the best to manage it. Can we please have all of our products? Chain oil, fuel boosters, conveyor lube, crankcase oil, there's a whole bunch. And I said, that sounds great. So we're having conversations with them. So what's happening now is we've got producers who I call, they're leaning in, they're trying,
Hmm.
and we appreciate that. And so I want to give them credit for that, thank them for that. Paint Care, in fact, we gave them the bill this year instead of running the whole bill as a household hazardous waste EPR for the whole gamut. We did just narrow it down to just cover the expansion to all paint products being in the paint program because the rest of the industry wasn't ready and they were. So we let them, so now they're off doing their thing. Now we've got the Lubricant Products Association and we're talking to them. But what's happening is I would encourage companies, I've always said, if you're not at the table, you're likely to be on the menu. Please come to the table because we don't want to produce rules. I'm always befuddled when an organization will say, well, that bill isn't written correctly. I said, well, where were you? We've been
Hmm.
asking for your help for years. We've been telling you there's a problem. You keep telling us there's not a problem. You get what you get when you don't participate. So if companies want to have a system that works for them, they need to step up and lean in. And when they do, we will welcome them with open arms and have honest discussions. So I just want to thank those two in particular for working with us recently.
I love it. And, Heidi, we just have a couple minutes left, and there are a lot of young people listening to this show who want a job just like yours. Give them a 30-second piece of advice, what they can do to get in the mix like you are.
Um, I created my own job. I left the
Hmm.
state. I had been my own consultant. I'm still doing a little consulting on the side um, because it gives me freedom. I've just learned that I'm a better leader than I am a follower. Um, you have to align with your personality and your morals. What is right for you? I can't sleep at night to take money to do bad things. I just can't.
Hmm.
That's me. So I decided that I was going to come out and really push for EPR. We've been highly successful. I really believe I did the right thing with my career.
Thank you. Yep.
And but it has been extremely hard, and there have been
Yep.
very hard times. Raising money is very hard. Um,
Absolutely.
you
That's
gotta find, yeah.
yeah, if you go it that route, that's the route I've taken too. I created my own job. It's hard, but absolutely worth it. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us today on Go Green Radio. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And thank you to our listeners for joining as well. We hope you have a great week. Do something in your life to go green.